Wow, I think you'll all agree we have a stellar panel here. To our left, we have Dr. Bernard Giraud from the Livelihoods Venture and Danone Incorporated. Next to him, Howard Shapiro, who you've just heard speak. Next to him, we have Sri Krisha Bhaira Gowda, the Minister of Agriculture for the state of Karnataka. Next to him, we have Tristram Lecombe, the CEO and founder of Perfect and Ashoka Fellow, and Ranjit Bathakor from Tata Consulting here in Delhi, India. So we're going to ask each of them to deliberate on the role of business and agroforestry, or the role of agroforestry in business. What is the business case? What are the facts, numbers, decisions, risks, opportunities emerging from those? And perhaps we could start on my left, at least, with Bernard, to introduce a few thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much for inviting myself and Livelihoods to share our experience. Well, I fully agree with the title of this panel, which is how can business contribute to accelerate the impacts of agroforestry? Obviously, there is a need for change, for step change of scale, change of speed, change of approach, and impact. I'm happy here to share some of the learnings that we have got through the Livelihoods Fund. For those who don't know, Livelihoods is a private sector investment fund that has been initiated by a French company called Danone, a food company. And now this fund has 9 corporations as investors and returns investment through carbon credits. It has already achieved 6 major investments, including 2 in India and 1 in agroforestry in Andhra Pradesh with Adivasi tribes, where 6 million fruit trees have been planted in this valley of Araku. Obviously, business can bring a lot. It can bring a connection to market, as we have seen with March, especially with the growing need for products complying with sustainability standards. But we should not forget the issues which are related to markets, such as price volatility, competition between cash crops and food security, balance in sharing the added value. Business can also be clearly an accelerator of scale. Basically, it's what business knows. What business does best is about simplification, processing, replication, measuring, certification. And that's what Livelihoods has been able to do with large-scale carbon project. But again, business efficiency must be balanced and integrated in a grassroots community approach. So combination between efficient business approach and I would say grassroots integrated community approach is a need. So what do we need to accelerate? We probably need new coalition of actors, and I think what was shown before is a good example of that. Businesses, meaning private sector, local project developers, research, and governments must form coalition, not coalition in general for good talks, but coalition through project with specific objectives that are co-financed, that are measured, and that are contracted. The second one is about how can we engage more private investment. Well, maybe combined with grants, but we need more private investments. We need also to decrease the level of risk So invent the frames which will attract more private investment in agroforestry project. We probably need also what I call result-based project and payment. There are probably too much of funded project without real result-based payments. And we need to create a scheme with investors and off-takers which are directly committed to pay for results not only on raw materials, but also on water resources, on biodiversity, and so ever. We probably need also to integrate more a business objective with social and environmental objective through landscape approach, through integrated approach. Skills in the future is about combining excellencies and talents, and that's what we learn from livelihoods, the combination of the level of expertise of large multinationals with the level of expertise of grassroots organization, plus the science that can be brought by organizations like ICRAF and others. It's absolutely the right combination to succeed. And on that, we need more, probably more knowledge, more science. And the speech before was a very good example of that. But we need more science which is close to the people. And in that area, we probably can improve with a more cost-effective research, closer to the smallholders, a research that can be better owned by the farmers themselves. Much progress is being made, as we can see here, but there is a lot of room for improvement. Of course, we need to respect the specificity of research, but we probably can review the processes, the time frame, the efficiency to better connect with business and also with local communities. We are working on a new generation of funds inspired by the experience of Livelihoods 1, and I would be absolutely happy to discuss with any of you who would be interested in discussing about what are those new frames and how we can cooperate. Thank you.
Great. I failed to notice we actually have some roving mics, so we can ask you to sit down in your chairs. We can jump over Howard. I think we'll give you a chance to speak at the end. But I'd like to come to the Minister for Agriculture for State of Karnataka to think about how the government pull side of business sector is so important.
I thank ICRAF for this opportunity. This couple of months ago, we in India hosted the World Forum on Agriculture as well. That was in Hyderabad. So this event, I was at that event as well. And you guys at ICRAF seem to have outdone the World Forum on Agriculture itself, looking at the diversity and the number of participants from around the world. So great job. I commend your efforts in putting this together. Also, thank you for the opportunity to be with you here this morning to interact, share my thoughts. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'll share some of my thoughts on the challenges that we as policymakers face. Though I generalize it, my intention is not to speak for every experience there is. I speak only based on generalization of my experience, and I'll be broad in my comments. Now, I come from the state of Karnataka, and we have a lot of public institutions we have set up in order to address and provide solutions to a lot of issues that the farmers face. What I experience after being in my position is that I frankly don't have solutions for a lot of issues that the farmers are facing. And oftentimes, I also find that if I do have solutions, I'm not able to reach them to all the farmers. So there are two issues here. One is the ability of public institutions to develop technologies which are solutions, and the ability of the state to actually deliver those solutions to the farmers. I find that I'm not doing a very good job of both developing and delivering solutions. I find that because of my incapability, the farmers are suffering. The farmers are not getting the best that exists out there. Farmers are not finding solutions to their issues. Oftentimes, I find that me, the state, and the parastatal organizations, we oftentimes end up preaching to the farmers, not oftentimes delivering solutions to the farmers. Now, why am I mentioning that here? I'm mentioning because this particular session is devoted to the role of business in agroforestry. And this is where I find that there is a lot of scope for businesses to step in to fill some of the needs that are coming out of an evolving situation. In my own state, I realized that there was a time when the state institutions were able to deliver and have made significant impact on the farmers' lives. But today, that is changing. The farmers' needs are changing, and farmers' capabilities also have changed. Today, farmers are in a position where they can interact with the businesses directly, where they can absorb technologies from the private sector directly. So I think it is time we in the state realized that the state is no more omnipotent, is no more omnipresent, and for us to realize that the farmers and the private industry can be facilitated to work together by the state, and there is a lot of benefit that we can derive from this. More than any other benefit, I am an advocate of this because I think farmers will be the beneficiaries at the end of this. And I was going through Dr. Shapiro's discussion. The one thing I liked about it is that to work with farmers groups, we have had bad experiences of companies taking farmers for a ride. But if we modify that business approach, try to work with various farmers groups at different levels, then I think it would be a sustainable model. And I think it is time that we, those of us, policymakers, those who are part of the state system, realize that we must facilitate a good environment where more and more businesses can work with farmers for mutual benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srigrada, and to Tristan Lacombe from PerPerfect.
Can you pass me the device? I have a few slides to show you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your invitation. So I represent Pure Project. We are a project developer. We develop agroforestry projects around the world, mainly for companies within their supply chains. And so we've made up this word that we call insetting instead of offsetting, which means offsetting the footprint, the global footprint of a company, but within its own supply chain. And we think that this way we can really increase the dynamics around offsetting and around agroforestry as well. So I won't go back to what is agroforestry because you are all specialists about that here. But basically we help small-scale farmers to go from monocropping to multi-cropping. And we try to value all the benefit it represents for farmers, planet, this we know, but as well for the companies. And we always work with the three together. So this is the benefits in terms of environment, but I won't go too deep into that because you already know it quite well. And very importantly, we always value the ecosystem services in terms of tons of carbon, for example, or amount of water that has been purified, but as well in terms of money. And because this way we can prove to the companies that they have an interest to do so. This is the impact of agroforestry on some coffee fields. Again, I go quite fast on this, so we see there is a correlation. And we have the same observations as you, Mr. Shapiro. Like in Peru, in this project where we plant trees with cocoa, we do 1.5 ton per hectare, 1.5 to 2 ton, whereas in Ivory Coast, where there is no trees, with the cocoa, we are between 400 and 600 kilo a hectare. This is the impact on the farmer, so it can diversify its incomes. This is for cocoa farmers in Ghana, both by reducing the use of fertilizer, so it earns more, it's the yellow line, as well yield increase in green, and timber sales in brown. So in average, we can multiply his revenue by 2 to 4. And it doesn't have only a benefit in terms of money, but as well in terms of patrimony. And as well, it helps him to adapt to climate change and to foster social cohesion. Our projects are on 40 years, so it's really a long-term benefit as well. We help farmers on land titles, on many other benefits around the tree. The tree is the backbone of a project, but there is many more to do. And here, this is the most maybe interesting for you. It's how we value then the benefits for the company. Because of course we are only funded by companies like Nestle, Procter, large-scale companies. And what we have to show for them to give the money is that they have an interest in that. So basically, they mainly do that to secure the procurement of products, like in this case, Nespresso, to have good quality product and in sufficient quantity. Because as you know, if you have a rich soil, thanks to agroforestry, you'll have a better product. And you'll have as well much more stable crops than if it's full sun, especially for coffee or cocoa. So they have a direct benefit for that. It helps as well to strengthen the relationship with their suppliers, and as well, of course, it builds up a lot on brand equities. They have a lot to say about where their coffee or cocoa comes from and how they work with farmers, and it has a strong value with their customers. So here we can see that investing in trees is very small. It's about €1,000 per hectare, but then you get multiple benefits forever. This is the magic of trees. That's why we say to companies, tree is not only good for the planet and for the environment, because most of the people we meet, they don't really care. I mean, it's not on their agenda. But we say it's the best investment you can make. There is no better investment in the world than planting a tree. And here you can see it through the ecosystem services that are generated for the farmers, for the planet, and for you as a company. And we value it. We have made a scientific review, there are about 700 scientific reviews which value the benefits of planting trees in agricultural systems. I won't go into much details. And we have listed all the indicators that help to value exactly how much you get in terms of water, biodiversity, money, etc. And so, for example, if one company has to offset 400,000 tons of CO2 equivalent and to plant 1.6 million trees, they invest €3 million, and we can estimate the internal rate of return for the company itself and for the global ecosystem of the company. So you see it's a 49% internal rate of return. There is nobody on the stock exchange that will guarantee you 49% internal rate of return. So it's really the best investment you can make. And then you have a product which has many claims that you can value, and it's backbone by scientific studies. So now some cases, for example, for Nescafé in the Philippines, we see that we can improve the revenue of the farmer, almost multiply by 3 over 20 years, and already by 2 after 7 to 10 years, by planting mahogany and falcata, which is a leguminosis, so as well it helps the farmer to reduce its chemical inputs. And for Nescafé, they will break even this investment between 11 and 25 years because they will have more coffee produced locally, so they don't have to import the coffee from Vietnam, which costs them more. That's why they prefer to pay the trees to their farmers, and then no more in some years to have to import from Vietnam. So that's why they are ready to pay for the farmers. And as well, they have many other benefits that I don't want to go into details. We do the same for Ben & Jerry's for their cocoa because they want as well good quality chocolate and they're very involved brand. This is for Marks & Spencer's. And as you can see, for many brands, you can duplicate this insetting principle. This is for water, a bottle of water, because as you know as well, trees can sequester the excess of nitrates and phosphates, and as well of heavy metals. So this company has planted a lot of trees, both in France at the source of water to depollute the soils, because there is intensive agricultural practices, and as well in Peru, which is the first reserve of fresh water in the world. And then they communicate on it, both on the carbon offset, but as well on the water offset of their activity. This is for hotel business chain. So here we plant in 21 projects next to the hotels, even in India. And it helps them to reduce their footprints. And so you see, we work with quite many brands. This is some examples, luxury brands like Chanel or Dior, Louis Vuitton, who want to as well promote their brand and secure the procurement, secure their supply chain. And so to conclude, how can we grow the agroforestry market and the climate market from a niche to a mainstream? It's, we think, by insetting, because when you integrate like that projects within supply chains, it's more legitimate. It's not like corporate social responsibility. It's really fully integrated in the business of the companies. They know why they do it, because they get a benefit, so they can invest much more than just giving the paycheck at the end of the year. So we think we can grow the market industry, I mean the agroforestry and climate industry very much by integrating and by doing insetting. And this was just about the climate, but then if we apply it to all the ecosystemic services in the global market, we think there is a lot of opportunities to create jobs and growth thanks to ecosystem services development. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Tristan. One of the values at the World Agroforestry Centre that we have as an institution is it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And one of the rules that we had for panel sessions was no PowerPoints, please. But it's wonderful that, you know, if you told that to a group of scientists, they would all behave, they would all follow the rules. But it's great that private sector is showing the way, that a bit more independent thinking, a bit more turning things on its head. So Tristan, you don't have to ask for forgiveness at all. That was a great expose, and it probably sets the stage for maybe some of the other panels following on. So you are allowed to break the rules if it actually helps us move forward. And so we come to, it's a pleasure to come to our last panelist to speak, Ranjit Bathakar from Tata Consulting. Ranjit.
Thank you.
Do you have a PowerPoint or a stage show or some dances?
I won't break the rules, even though change is the only constant that we've learned. Anyway, thank you both Tony, Goroli and Simmons for having me here to sort of address such a knowledgeable gathering. So I must compliment my predecessors and Mr. Shapiro for his earlier presentation. I must also compliment the minister for his honesty. I think it's important that we have honest ministers and leaders, helps to shape the future. I have sort of, as this is a discussion, I have 4 or 5 themes. The first theme that I have is, you know, I come from a place in northeastern India, which is called Assam. And, you know, we grow a lot of tea there. It's in the sub-Himalayan region. And the interesting thing about growing of teas is that alongside these teas, there are forests, and alongside the thought of these forests, that there were forests in the teas. If you really go into a tropical forest, you find that this tropical forest is it best epitomizes what actually agroforestry is. When there was a hunting, picking, and gathering scenario, you actually had the entire forest, which gave you different delivery systems at different levels, at different forms and stages of the year for different fruits, plants, and animals, for the predator, which happened to be the human beings, which actually took advantage of it. So ideally speaking, to me, if I had to dream of an agroforestry, it is actually a tropical forest which has everything in it. What happened, however, as we moved on from the agriculture, Stone Age, agriculture, and then into industrialization. And this is not about a blame, but it's about the progress of this world with industrialization. What we did was, we actually felled the forests, and then we started growing two very important delivery items. Because this conference, I think, really focuses not so much on the fact that agroforestry is good, but the fact that food security is really what we need to address. And if it's food security, how do we sustain food security and work backwards to actually bring about a balance in the world? So if you look at it, post-industrialization, we did things for better, brighter, faster, cheaper, and bigger. So what we really did, we brought down all the forests and we created 3 themes for food and for beverages and for usages, which were for better living. Better living is very best epitomized by cane and bamboo and wood, which we use for our homes, or for that matter, granite as the way moves forward, or glass, all out of natural resources. So that's one theme. The second theme that we've actually looked at is the beverage industry. If you look at most of the presentations, most of the thoughts that we're talking about are not products necessary to live, but have become necessary to want. Because that's the way the world moves, and change is constant, and it's good to look forward different delivery items. And then you look at beverages includes tea, of which I'm involved in, and I'll just give you some examples of agroforestry which we have done. Very failed attempts and very unsuccessful attempts at actually restoring back what we call a better planet. Then we come to what I call the carbohydrate triangle. And the carbohydrate triangle is this entire success that we talk about in maize and rice and corn, and basically the entire food stuff, the basic food stuff that is the basic food of ours. And you actually begin to wonder that is this monoculture that we've actually tried to do because of the Industrial Revolution the very pinnacle of the problem of food security, and therefore the problem of what we're trying to address, having created it through the World Agroforestry Congress, which is leading an excellent and wonderful revolution. Because what you're really saying is back to basics. That what you really do is develop the cycle, as was shown in the earlier presentation, or as was shown in the science of developing the entire chocolate and entire delivery system around that, is that you're addressing 5 different parameters. One is you're addressing better management of land. You're addressing better management of, not spoken about so far, but energy. We're talking about better management of waste. We're talking about better management of water, and we're talking about better management of air. If you give it these 5 parameters, the output of which is carbon, I think much reference was made to by my colleague on the panel about carbon, and therefore carbon sequestration, we see that the combination of LEWAC, land, energy, wastewater, air, and carbon, is really the combination of what agroforestry and the delivery items are trying to do. I believe in the plantations that we work, we have 27,000 hectares of tea. In that, there has been attempts in the past, but wrongly so, because unless we change, as was referred to earlier, we actually are barking up the wrong tree. So you have a tea plantation with shade trees, which is indigoferous, and that used to provide the fertilizer material for the teas at that point in time, and it provided with firewood for the workers, and therefore there was a cycle which actually helped the entire delivery system. What we've done is we've gone a step further and started planting pepper on those trees. So actually you have a tea plantation, you have firewood, you have fertilizer of sorts, and you have pepper. So actually we have, in a way, diversified, but it's far from what actually the needs were wanted. So we've taken one of the estates, 500 hectares, and it sits on one of India's most successful and sort of conservation stories. It's called Kaziranga Park, where you get the one-horned rhino. There are 1,200 one-horned rhinos there. There were 75 at the beginning of this century. It's important to understand that the tea garden that sits on top of the park actually used a lot of insecticides and fertilizers, and all that actually flowed through, was there from groundwater, surface water into the park, and actually brought about from studies that we saw recently and not in the past. So the damages must have been incredible to the entire life cycle of the plant and the animal sort of cycle. I believe that the entire agroforestry movement needs to address these hubs by making successors all over. In India, I can only speak about the Northeast and North Bengal, south of the Himalayas, where we've made attempts at agroforestry, not very successful. And these two examples of turning an entire ecosystem of chemical industrialized tea plantation into an organic plantation has led us, and the ire of my board, to a loss of a small loss, because it's only 500 acres out of 500 hectares out of the 27,000, of about $2 or $3 million over the last few years. But it's very demoralizing for the 3,000 people that work there to be on a loss leader delivery system within that organization. The good news is technology has come to our rescue, and I'll sort of end with that before I suppose it opens up. And I think with technology, one of the organizations that I advise, the one that is mentioned, Tata Consulting Services, have created two technology platforms. One is called GeoVan, which is actually to measure how much forestry there is in any given state of balance alongside, say, paddy fields or alongside maize fields. So there's a whole system of mechanism, and to actually manage and monitor this entire process of growth and measure all the other elements that we're talking about, like water, air purity, etc. The other one is M-Krishi. M-Krishi is for farmers to actually put in a framework in which they can find out what the weather conditions are, what delivery items are, and the entire value chain for delivery. I think a combination of these two seem to be helping, even though we don't have the answer as all being positive. I don't want to end sort of on a pessimistic note. So I do believe that technology is the future. And I do believe that technology is not the only future. There's an emotional bondage that all our people at the grassroots level have. And as in the minister's words, I think very sort of resonates well with me. We cannot preach anymore. It is for us to actually learn together to make sure that this revolution that the World Agroforestry has done actually permeates down all levels. Thank you.
Ranjit, thanks very much. We're going to ask the panel to close with a few thoughts on their thinking. And the question that I'd like you to be thinking about responding to is, what would you like others to do differently? What do you want the scientists in the room? What do you want the NGOs and CBOs? What do you want the policymakers? And what do you want other private sector to do differently to make things change? And while you're thinking of the answer to your closing question, we do have time for a couple of questions from the audience. There are some microphones set up here. So please come forward if you have a question or a provocation or a thought to share. Please come to one of the microphones, and we'd ask that you identify yourself and be very brief.
I am a small businessman from Indonesia working on non-timber forest products, and I'm the only trader. If there's anyone else here who actually trades and makes a living from working with forest or agroforestry products rather than being the producer seller, how many people here actually are in that business position of being traders?
Stay seated if you're in that business.
Okay, so we have very large corporations represented and none of the small traders that actually, on a day-to-day basis, interact with the producers that you are researching. So that is just a question to pose, whether this kind of forum, in being a Congress on Agroforestry, and something that, an organization that changed its name from Research on Agroforestry to simply about agroforestry, whether that vision that was embodied in that rebranding needs to be carried through more in terms of small and middle scale private sector participation.
Great, thank you. Very good point. I will take that as an observation rather than a question. Thank you. Ramni?
Yes, I have a question, and I would like to have some answers. We would like to promote agroforestry in a business model, but we have a lot of difficulty dealing with the bureaucrats, the leaders of the countries. One example is there is this Jatropha that has been introduced by the former president, and then it has been taken up by farmers extensively, and now it's over because he is no longer the president. So here the farmers who took it up has a lot of this oil, they don't know where to sell it. So I think the first thing that we have to do is that we really have to lobby. It is very, very important to lobby, because if the government officials will not agree, I think we cannot do anything and we cannot move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. We'll take that as an observation and a recommendation rather than a question. Ramni?
Yeah, my name is Ramni Jamnadas. I'm from World Agroforestry, ICRAF, from Kenya. Mine is an observation. I feel this panel also needed a donor, a very high-level donor, because most of us here are scientists. So all the recommendations that our esteemed panelists have made about integrated, uncommon collaborations, diversification, I think the problem is that donors are not promoting a lot of that kind and sustaining that kind of collaborations long term. We are foresters or agroforesters. So I feel that that is something that's missing on a chair there, and to have their perspective as well, and to have them understand the needs.
Great, thanks. We'll take that as an observation. Any other questions, observations, critiques? Yes. We'll take, this is the last one, and then ask the panelists to respond.
Good morning. Somebody else is there, I guess. I am A.K. Shrivastava from ICR. At present, I am working with for an integrated farming system. My point is that much of the remarkable progress in agriculture and allied things, including agroforestry, was concurrently with the development of the manpower, whether state agriculture universities or other educational institutions, academic institutions. So when we are going to the business of agroforestry, of course, on one hand, the inputs are there, resources are there, skill development for management and production is there. How about the post-production and marketing? So the efforts have to also start for building up proper manpower, HR, for this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the human capacity side of it. Everyone else who has a question, please come and ask our panelists during the coffee break and lunchtime, and sit next to them, speak to them in the hallway. There's a lot of I see a sea of hands still wanting to answer questions. But we'll come back to our panel now for closing thoughts. And we can start with Howard, I think. Closing thoughts, Howard, on what would you like others to do differently?
Very quickly. I think there's three key words: urgency, urgency, urgency. And what we're talking about is not static. These are urgent concerns. These farmers are leaving their farms, their forests, to be either untended or unintended consequences and moving to the cities because they're not able to generate enough income. The second thing is you got to bring your competitors to the table. I mean, we're not doing this without Nestle or Mondelez or Ferraro or the giant brokers like Barry Callebaut or Cargill, Ecom, Olam, what have you. They have to be with you. And it's pre-competitive. Most of what we're talking about is pre-competitive. We don't buy directly from the cacao farmers. It goes into the market. Number 3 is you must translate the science without dogma. That was one of the comments made earlier, that whether you believe in organic or conventional or whatever your mantra is, you have to deliver it without dogma. And the dogma must be the truth. So much of what I hear is made up and referential without any truth at all. And everything must be scalable. If you have a 1 hectare plot and you publish a major paper on it that's going to change the world, it's probably not true. You really have to be able to have scalability. And Mina, who's in the room as well from ICRAF, used the word sustainability not long ago. And it's different from sustainability, which is fairly static. This is the ability to be resilient, and I think that's critical. And the last point, to answer one of the observations, is donors come and go. They're short term, 3 years. Businesses are here for a long term. And I think the difference is that getting the business community to invest like donors some of their profitability is a very, very different change agents than standing in line with your begging cup at the door of donors around the world that are shrinking their pool and only wanting to fund exactly what their prejudices are.
Great, thanks, Howard. Bernard, what would you like others to do?
I fully agree with what Dr. Shapiro said. What we need is, there is an urgent need for what I call the coalition of actors, starting from farmers' organization, businesses, research organization, governments. Today, I have the impression that most of the resources come through donors, through governments, and it would be much more efficient if we have grassroots coalitions, not just general speaking about projects or big planification. What we need is this type of upfront investment, long-term investment with patient capital, result-oriented projects, not just grants and donors and large long-term research without any specific results. So I would really advocate that we encourage those field coalitions, putting together the excellencies, the resources, the skills, the experience of the private sector with civil society and farmers' organization with the support of governments.
Thank you, Bernard. Shrigada?
Again, my comments are fairly general and broad. My suggestion or request from the scientific community is that what I find is that a lot of times the technologies they develop or the science that they try to deliver is suited to an ideal condition. But the farmer lives in a very dynamic situation. And when you don't tailor your solutions to his or her situation, which has got a lot of challenges on its own, and if our solutions do not address those challenges, oftentimes what seems to work very well in a laboratory or in a demonstration plot doesn't convert into a very tangible solution in the farmer's field. Number two, the businesses. If more and more businesses work through farmers' organizations, farmers' groups, if they incubate farmers' groups and try to work through them, I think that would be a more sustainable model, because then it is a natural check and balance on businesses taking farmers for a ride, which is a a major concern for all of us. So if the businesses can work through small farmers groups, that would be good. But I think my primary challenge is with the state itself, as I made my thoughts very clear. The state needs to come out of its self-convincing position and realize that it needs to be more of a facilitator rather than to assume that I can do everything, I can deliver everything. I think that's what we, in the policy-making arena, need to come out of it and be the facilitator. As again, Dr. Shapiro said, that's a hard job when you're pushing a boulder up the hill. It's not a very easy one. But I think the primary challenge lies with the state itself. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. I wouldn't advise anything to scientists because, as we've seen, there is already a lot of studies on all the benefits of trees and agroforestry. And I think what we need today is to make it known, because we talk in the media a lot about like fair trade, organics, or others talk about GMOs or chemicals. Each one has his own chapel. But we never talk about agroforestry. Nobody knows about agroforestry. Each time I talk about agroforestry, nobody knows it, and even more about the International Association for Agroforestry. Whereas it's gold. There is no better system than agroforestry. It's so holistic, multi-criteria, it can adapt to any kind of agricultural system. So how come we have gold in our hands, but we cannot make it known, and there is no trader in here, there is no donor, etc.? So my advice would be to you, Tony, to open ICRAF and the whole agroforestry world, to the rest of the world, to make it known that yes, this is the best way to build a sustainable future, both for the farmers, for the planet, and for the companies too. Thank you.
Thanks. I hope we were recording that statement. Great. And lastly, Ranjit.
Yeah, just 2 points. One is, I think, for people who come from organized farming and monoculture systems, I think the scientific community within ourselves need to address what really should supplement and complement monocultures. I don't think we know the answers, and I think we're trying various things, but it's completely sort of far off the mark. And this is affecting the smaller growers who actually supply the bigger growers. So this is a very big issue on soil degradation and entire productivity as an issue, So I think that's the one request. The other one is a much larger issue, and I don't know about which countries have this, but certainly in India, in the 50s, the forest department and the agriculture department were one. So there was a symbiotic relationship. As you grew agriculture, you actually reduced the forest department. What happens is, unless these two departments, and in fact, an organization like yours, Tony, needs to address this, to have both these departments working in tandem. Because unless these two departments work in tandem, especially in a country like India, the push for agricultural land over forest land, and therefore to have agroforestry in forest land, is absolutely going to be a very difficult and far cry. It won't be the focus. So I think this business of getting government to have forest and agriculture departments working together would be one of the takeaways that I would request. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much to our panel. Just in wrapping up, some thoughts that came from the 5 presentations, or 5 interventions, were from Howard, the need for uncommon collaborations, that we needed to certify prosperity, that we needed to think big, but not only to think big, but also to act big. And that could also include aggregation of a lot of small effects. From Bernard, a call to be more effective and efficient and inclusive in our research. It's got to be more cost effective. We can't go on researching things forever. The analogies of the business of simplification, replication, scaling up is what business does successfully. The reliable supply chain means a reliable income. From Sri Gowda, I don't know how many people in the room have ever heard a state policymaker say, I want to be a facilitator, not a regulator. That's an amazing change of mindset. And I think that it behoves us to capitalize and also to promote that perspective of state and government and policymakers of being incentivized as facilitators, not regulators. How to bridge the knowledge gap, how to reach farmers. Essentially combining the science of discovery with the science of delivery. Tristan Lecomte, initials TLC, which in English we say tender loving care. We loved your comments about gold, but looking for the win-win opportunities from diversification. That those were the real benefits that agroforestry systems and the products and services from agroforestry trees give you. The idea of supply chain quality, that you will get that premium, you will get that demand, you will get that growth. And that sustainability was not just a CSR, corporate social responsibility event, but something that had to be in the fabric of the business. And lastly, Rajit, on the tropical forest analogue, how agroforestry systems can provide those goods and services and benefits through the role of cultivated trees. And what do we need and what do we want? And the aspect of the carbohydrate triangle, has that really served us in agriculture? And if we extend that to looking at the 5 parameters of land, energy, waste, water, and air, the better management of those is obvious through agroforestry. Measuring growth at the resource level and for farmers. And I love the term emotional technology. That's a lovely new part of our lexicon. And so in looking at those, we also need to think about ourselves being advocates of our knowledge, not just producing it. If I produce my database, I'll save the world. It's not very convincing. What is the business case? How many production economists do we have working on the value of agroforestry from the economic sense? The scientists need to allow others to tell you a story, to take away all of the caveats, to generalize, to simplify. And lastly, we need to be performance-based in our knowledge. In the generation, validation, proof of concept, it's got to be performance-based. We've got to focus in the business environment on what we need to know and not what it is nice to know. And so I ask everyone to show their appreciation to our panelists, please.